Welcome. Good evening, everybody. This is Tal with PhysicianLoans. I'm going to be your presenter for this evening. Excited to get through this information with you guys. There's a lot of information to cover. Before we do that, let me just take care of a few housekeeping items here. First of all, wanted to share a disclosure with you. I give this talk at about 40 schools across the country. I share this with everybody that there's no financial ties between us and your school. After the session, you're able to work with us if you'd like. We're happy to help you out, but there is no implied endorsement, not required to do so. This is an informational session, and the school brings it to you in hopes of helping you with your financial literacy. I was going to talk about questions. I see. Let's do just a quick audio check here. Looks like one person has sent in that they are not able to hear, but I think we did our audio check. Again, if you guys can hear me okay, go ahead and raise your hands. That will just show me that we're working across the board. Yep, so I see hands going up. I'm going to go ahead and lower everyone's hands. Is it Chantel? I apologize. I would work with your speakers there. But it looks like the system is working. All right, so who am I? Why am I here before we get into this? So I love starting with this picture, especially when I do a talk at University of Cincinnati, because this picture that you see here on the right-hand side was taken on your campus. So that's me in front. That's sitting down many, many years ago. And I'm sitting in front of one of my brothers. And this is his match day at University of Cincinnati. And to our left are our parents. And the reason I start with this photo is because it gives a little bit of the story about how we got here. My parents started a mortgage company back in the early 90s. And back then it was a generic mortgage company. We did standard kind of financing. We're going to be talking about that along with special mortgages for doctors. But one of the things we learned having a brother, a son in medical school and in residency is that it's a bright group, but need a lot of assistance when it comes to financial matters, a lot of advice. And keep in mind, back then, you couldn't just Google anything you wanted as easily as you can now, and it was a lot tougher to get advice. So we tooled our company. What we did is we created a special program, a special loan for doctors, began focusing on helping that community. Fast forward, 20-some years, and we're kind of known name in this space, preferred provider through AMA, AOA, SOMA, and others. And like I said, we give these talks at schools across the country. So again, pleasure to be doing this, especially for University of Cincinnati, which we have some family ties to, with a doctor in the family having graduated from there. And the good news, by the way, it all works out, guys. He's doing okay. He ended up going into anesthesiology, and it all works out. So don't worry about it. All right, so continuing with why am I here, I also enjoy starting with this. Usually when I'm in front of you, I'll pose the question on what is it you guys want to learn. And I did a session a few weeks ago where the question was emailed to everybody in advance. And so the responses, when your peers and colleagues were asked, what is it you're hoping to learn and gain from this? These are quotes from other graduating med students across the country. What the heck is a mortgage? See what I'm doing, don't even know where to begin. And one of my favorites, just a single word response, everything. So, you know, here's the challenge. This is you guys, right? This is the medicine you've been students your entire lives. You're taught and trained to, you know, gobble up information, learn it, memorize it, use it, you know, kind of control it. And so you're in a real powerful position from that standpoint. Then we get to the mortgage you. No one's ever talked to you about it. No one's given any information, but a lot of you want to buy a home, if not this summer, then, you know, at some point in the near future. But now you feel like this poor deer in the headlights. So that's kind of the fear that I'm hoping to help you guys overcome. By the time we're done with this session, you will feel much more comfortable in how to navigate this process and how to find and rely on the two specific professionals who are going to help you out with this. This is a live session for tonight. It is being recorded, but so for tonight, you are able to type in your questions on your dashboard, and it's Q&A throughout. So at any point in time, type in your questions, and then at the end of the session, even once I've completed all my material, I will stick around as long as necessary for those of you that want to stay on and continue the discussion, continue asking any questions that you have. So, you know, I've been doing this long enough, again, 20 plus years, where I know what some of your top questions are. We will be addressing that. Buy versus rent. If I want to buy, how much do I qualify for? How much money do I need to make this happen? So again, we're going to be covering all of this, and anything that I don't hit on, feel free to type in your questions. So I do jump around a little bit, but just to get you comfortable with where this is headed, I like starting with the number one question, which is buy versus rent. And the answer to this is in this Venn diagram here, where if you're going to be a candidate for buying a home, because once you graduate, we know you're going to need a roof over your head, right? So you'll buy or you'll rent. To even be a candidate for buying, then these three circles have to overlap, meaning whatever monthly payment you're comfortable with has to overlap with how much you qualify for. We'll be discussing both of those. And that also has to overlap with the local home prices. What does real estate go for in that market? And is it priced such that a resident can purchase? So if you match in a city where you've got the convergence here of these three things, great. Then you're a candidate for buying. Doesn't mean you have to buy, but you're a candidate. If you're matching in a place where this is the situation, so you're graduating from University of Cincinnati and you are headed to Columbia for residency in New York City, good luck trying to buy a place. It's just not going to be feasible. So renting will be the sole option to get you through those several years. So again, this is going to be key. We already have some questions coming in where does the amount of money you can take out for a house depend on your specialty choice? And the answer is no, because regardless of your specialty, regardless of your residency, and regardless of where you are in the country, a first-year resident, everyone makes about the same amount of money, plus minus a few $1,000s, but it's pretty much the same. So your specialty while you're in residency doesn't matter. Now, after residency, sure. If you are a general practice physician, pediatrician versus neurosurgeon, cardiac, surgery, obviously there will be different annual income there, but for the next several years, no. And does your spouse's income or job affect the loan at all? So yes, if you are relocating with somebody, and we're going to be going through this. I'm glad you're asking now, and I will answer all of your questions. But you'll see we'll do the calculations. If you are moving and buying a house with somebody who has an income, then you can use their income and qualify for even more. If you're buying a house with somebody, by the way, just because this question comes up pretty frequently, you don't have to be married to them. It could be a boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, spouse, but as long as they are buying the home with you, and it will be their primary residence. So, what we're going to cover are the 4 things that matter most, which, again, continuing with this Venn diagram, it's if you're moving to an area, if you match an area where the housing is affordable for your household income, whether you're single income or dual income, it's finding the right loan officer, which is the person who handles your financing for the mortgage. It's the right real estate agent who helps you with the local housing market, getting under contract, buying the home, and having the right loan program. So this is just a high-level overview of where we're headed with this, but these are the 4 things that matter most. You do these properly, and you'll be okay. So the number 2 question is, well, what price range can I look at? And if you are a single-income household, most of you will buy a home somewhere in the 200s. We'll see a low of 120, 125,000 up to the low 300,000 range, with a monthly mortgage payment of around 800 to 1,900 a month. Some will be higher, some lower, but that range will cover most of you. For those of you that are a dual income family, then you can purchase a home in the $450,000, $500,000 range. And again, this year, everything's virtual. Normally, I'm on campus, but when I'm in front of this crowd, especially in a market, so we happen to be based out of Columbus, Ohio. That's where we're our headquarters. And so, let's say I'm giving a talk in Toledo where the housing market is even more affordable. And I talk about a resident buying a $500,000 home, that everyone gasps, like, who needs a $500,000 home as a resident? Well, what if you match it to us, right? What if you're in Boston, the condos, just a small condo in the city over there starts in that $600,000 range. So this, again, it's just a high-level overview to get started, but shows you what it is that you can expect to be able to buy as a resident. So continuing with the buy versus rent, there are 4 top decision factors. And the number 1 is match city. And we're already kind of hitting on that. Is it even feasible? Is it affordable? There's an article I came across not too long ago in Bloomberg Business Week, and this was their lead-in paragraph talking about the case for moving to Houston. Why Houston, Texas? Well, they put together this chart where along the x-axis, you've got the cost of living index. Along the y-axis, you've got your pay index. And so it shows the affordability of housing in these cities And I apologize if this is a little bit light. I don't know if you can see it on your screens, on your devices over there, but if you look at Houston, Houston is in the top left-hand quadrant there. So Houston is the best ratio of getting paid the most relative to the cost of living. Swing over to the right-hand side of this chart, you'll see San Diego, Los Angeles, Santa Maria, no coincidence, these are all in California, where yes, you get paid more, but relative to the cost of living, as a proportion, it's less. So you'll notice Cincinnati falls in the bottom left-hand quadrant, right next to Columbus over there. Cleveland's not far away. So it's towards the center where you're kind of at equilibrium, meaning for those of you that do match in Cincinnati, or pretty much anywhere in Ohio for that matter, buying is at least an option. So I like showing this chart to help give you an idea of, all right, how do we look at real estate? How do we begin to analyze this? By the way, you'll notice I come in here, my goal is to educate you guys. I don't come in here with a bias, truly, where I'm going to tell you guys you have to buy a home, that you should buy a home. Not the case. Some of you will be able to buy a home. Some of you will not be able to buy a home. Some of you shouldn't buy a home. So my goal is that once we're done here, you'll have a better idea of how to go through this process and determine if you can buy a home, and then have the power to make that decision if you want to buy or rent. So, before we get to the second factor, is Mark asks, is that the same for two resident salaries given the loan debt? So when we're talking about the dual income household, yes, because the second income is a second income, and we know there will be debt along with that. That's fine. We'll be talking about a special mortgage for doctors called a physician loan, which is even more lenient on your debt. So yeah, even two residents, you're able to buy twice as much as what you would be able to as a single resident. So good question. So continuing with the buy versus rent analysis, there's the time in the home. So it's how long you plan to be in the property. The general rule of thumb is that if you're going somewhere for 1 to 2 years, if you're doing a 1 year transition period, research, whatever the scenario is for 1 or 2 years, just rent for that period. Don't even worry about buying. 3 years or more, it makes sense to consider buying a home. And if we drill down a little bit further on that, 3 years, it depends. It will make sense to buy in some cities, and it depends on what you buy. The case is even stronger for buying if you're planning to stay put in the property for 4 or more years. So there's a website that I like to reference, FHFA.gov. It's going to be listed in the handouts also as a resource. And this is a government website that does a quarterly survey of housing values. And so here's what the U.S. housing values have done since 1991. Even if you're looking at a device that's too small to see the dates along the bottom, it's pretty clear here where 2008, where that crash happened. And, certainly home values went down for a few years from that peak, and then they turned around and went back up and then surpassed where that prior peak. So I show this to help make that point that there are risks. If we were to blow this timeline up even more into smaller increments, you'd see even more of the kind of up-down scenario. And so the goal is, if you're going to be buying a place, you're buying it and will be in it long enough so that hopefully, worst case scenario, you're breaking even. And of course, the longer you hold it, the general rule in real estate is that the longer you hold it, the more it makes sense from a financial standpoint. And I'll get to that in a little bit more detail here in just one second. First, lifestyle. Lifestyle has nothing to do with the numbers. It's just, do you prefer the lifestyle of being a renter or an owner? If you buy a place, just as with anything you own, there's maintenance. And if you don't want any maintenance, rent. If you want to split the difference, talk to your real estate agent about buying a condo where you don't have to worry about any of the maintenance on the outside and just make sure the inside is taken care of. So the final decision factor is the financial benefits. And what I want to do with this next slide is I go into analysis that shows the financial benefits of owning versus renting. However, I'm not going through this example to make the point that you should be buying. Again, any financial professional, or I should say so-called financial professional, who tells you guys you should buy a home right now for the financial benefits, so that's a clear indication of a salesperson who's just trying to make a buck on you. But because I'm tasked with teaching you the principles behind home ownership and improving your financial literacy, we're going to go through this example so that you understand how the analysis is done and you understand the concept between owning versus renting. So we're going to compare here is renting a place for $1,300 a month over 4 years. So over that 4-year period, you will have paid $62,000 in rent. We're going to compare, and I'm keeping this a very simplified example. I'm assuming no increase in rent, no other outside factors. So again, it's to kind of teach the principle here. We're going to compare this to buying a place for $275,000, and you're going to own it for 4 years. So in this example, your PITI, which is your principal, interest, taxes, insurance, that's the technical jargon for your mortgage payment. We will break that down further so you see exactly what's involved there. But for right now, your mortgage on that house, if you bought it using a physician loan, no money down, so zero down, your monthly payment would be just over $1,500 a month. So on a monthly basis, in this example, it's costing you more to buy versus rent. But there are two benefits to home ownership. One of them being equity, the second appreciation. So what is equity? Every month when you make a mortgage payment, you're paying down part of the principal balance, part of the amount that you owed. So of that $74,000, about $21,000 is going to pay down your mortgage. So again, let's keep this simple. Let's assume you sell that home for the same $275,000 4 years later. You owe $21,000 less on it. So if you get a check for $275,000, you obviously have to pay back the mortgage, but you're left with $21,000. You get that back. So if you've heard that saying, why rent and pay the landlord when you can own and pay yourself, this is where that comes from. You have a mortgage on it, but part of your mortgage payment is paying down your balance. I see a question that came in here. No down payment. Yes, I will get to that. You can buy a home with no money down, and there is no PMI. Stephanie, it looks like you might be ahead of the crowd already. PMI is private mortgage insurance, and that is insurance that a lender forces a buyer to pay to protect the lender should they default. A doctor with good credit is not going to default on a mortgage, or statistically very, very low likelihood. So I'll be talking about this, a true physician loan. That's that program that I said, we kind of pioneered special financing for doctors. There is no PMI on a physician loan and no down payment required. So we'll get back to that. So Krista, you're asking a good question also. John, you've got like an advanced mortgage crowd here. Krista asked, what percentage of the monthly mortgage payment goes towards the principal? So you clearly have an understanding that part goes towards principal, part goes towards interest, but it's not just split evenly. There's an amortization schedule. Once you start working with your loan officer can run this for you. In fact, you can even go online and run a scenario yourself, or if you just we have one on our website on PhysicianLoans.com, or you just Google mortgage calculator or amortization calculator, and it'll show you of your mortgage payment how much of it goes towards principal, how much towards interest. It starts out with more going towards interest, less towards principal, and with each payment, more goes towards principal, less towards interest. So it's constantly moving. Good questions, guys. So there's the equity. Then there's also the appreciation. The appreciation is the increase in value of your home from the time you bought it to the time that you sold it. A safe, conservative appreciation over time is about 3.5%, which is what I have here. The national average over the last year has been about 6.5 to 7%. I don't like putting in those higher numbers just when I'm trying to make assumptions to give a point. I want to be more conservative. But given the equity and the appreciation, which again, the appreciation means that if you go to sell this house for years, if it appreciated about 3.5% a year, it means it's worth $36,000 more when you sell it than when you bought it. So what that means is at the end of 4 years, it would cost you about $17,000 for this ownership versus $62,000 in rent, so a difference of about $44,000. However, the analysis doesn't end there. There are two things that chip away at this difference, and one of them is the maintenance. Again, if you own something, there's a break, repairs needed, something breaks, you're responsible for it. I included just an industry kind of standard average of about 1% per year of your purchase price. So in this example, it's about $10,000 in maintenance over 4 years. Obviously, if you bought a condo, especially a new condo, that would be less. If you buy an old 1930s home that needs some TLC, it's going to be more, and you're going to take that into consideration in your budget. But still, the bigger item is the cost of selling your home. When you sell it, the real estate agents, there are 2 agents, get a commission of 3% each. So that's going to end up being about $18,000. So once you take those costs into consideration, your net difference is about $16,000. Now, again, if I put in different numbers for higher appreciation, it would be a lot more if I was comparing this to a less expensive home. Again, this isn't to say that if you guys buy a home, then over the next 4 years, you will make $16,000 on that home. It's just to give the concept behind it. And of course, that number is going to be different depending on what rental you compare to what you buy and the city. So we're going to take a closer look at how you analyze some of those numbers. But a lot of what I talk about, and you'll be seeing more about this, is about who you can trust. And here's a flyer from a loan officer to a real estate agent. And notice in their text, what they're doing here is they're trying to say, hey, let's team up and get these buyers or get these prospects to buy the homes. We want them to buy a home. We don't want them to be scared of buying a home because it's I'm reading towards the bottom here. My job is to educate them on how quickly they can build wealth in the real estate and to relieve their stress. So I'm calling BS on this, and this is what I want to protect you guys from out there, because if you look at their analysis, in their example, they're saying the way they're doing this is you put a down payment of $20,000 on a home that you bought for $400,000. They're saying over the last year, over a 12-month period, the home appreciated 6.5%. So on paper, I'm sorry, the home appreciated 6.5%. So on paper, it's now valued at $426,000, meaning you made $26,000 on a $20,000 down payment, what they're calling, investment. This is really false calculation. It doesn't work that way. First of all, they're only doing this on a 1-year basis, which no one's buying a home and selling for a year, after a year. And they're not taking into consideration any of those fees that I just showed you, the transaction cost of selling, the maintenance. So what they're claiming is 130% ROI, return on investment, is false and it's misleading. And that's why it's important for you to know the concepts so that you can make the analysis that you don't fall for this kind of stuff, and that you're able to decide if it makes sense for you to buy or rent. So again, what it boils down to is this Venn diagram. Very simply, are you going to be in a city where the housing is affordable? So how do we determine now, moving into the next subject, how do we determine now what is affordable? And this is where we get into what's called the debt ratio, or debt to income ratio, also known as DTI, income. And what the ratio is your total monthly debt divided by your monthly gross or pre-tax income. So every loan type, and we haven't gotten into these loan types yet, we will shortly, but every loan type allows for its own maximum debt ratio. So what we offer, the physician loan, we allow a 50% debt ratio. So if we were trying to determine how much you qualify for, we would plug in 50% on the left-hand side of this equation. On the right-hand side, the denominator is easy. Your annual salary divided by 12 goes in there. In the numerator, we put in all of your monthly debt payments, the monthly debt. And this is, you guys don't have to be overwhelmed by this. You don't need to do this on your own. This is one of the first steps a loan officer goes through with you in order to determine how much you qualify for. And basically what we're doing here is we're assuming a housing payment of X, and we want to see how big that housing payment can be and have this ratio be true. Right, so we're going to solve for X, or we're going to solve for your housing payment. And so if we plug in some numbers here, let's assume you're allowed a debt ratio of 50%. Your monthly gross pre-tax income is $4,800 in this example. That means your total monthly debt could be up to $2,400. Once we back out of that, your debt, monthly debt payments, let's just say your debt payments are about $600 a month. So that's going to leave you with an $1,800 a month housing payment. That would be your maximum amount. That's not your goal. That's not your target. Now, you're not trying to spend every cent that you can, but that's the highest that you could go. And now your loan officer will tell you, all right, $1,800 in this city, here's how much of a house you can buy. Here's a price range you should be looking at. Now, guys, here's the million-dollar question. How are your student loans accounted for? So I've hinted at a physician loan. Based on your questions, it's clear that some of you are already familiar with that. We'll get into more detail. So on the reason most of you will need a physician loan at this stage is because right now you're not making payments yet on your student loans. And once you graduate, you're in an automatic 6-month grace period. That's what most of you will have. And so this summer, if you're trying to buy a home this summer, you do not have proof from your student loan servicer on what your monthly payments are. And traditional lending requires proof from your student loan servicer. So a physician loan simply assumes your income-based repayment. And you'll, as for those of you that were on a little early, that's what I was discussing with John, you'll have a session in March with your different payment plan options. And we just assume an IBR payment. We don't need proof. And that's how you get qualified, even though you don't have proof. A question came in here. Can we still take out a physician loan if my spouse is military and we already own another home in a different city? Does it have to be our first home? All right. A physician loan does not have to be your first home. And in fact, you can use a physician loan multiple times. So a lot of doctors will use it buying a home going into residency. Once you're done with residency, I hate to be a kind of a spoiler here, but at the end of residency, although you will now have a 6-figure job lined up, you haven't had a chance to save much money, so it's not like you're going to have a big down payment on a home. So a lot of those wrapping up residency will still do a physician loan for the home after residency, so it does not have to be your first home. If you own another home and you're not selling it beforehand, that's perfectly okay, but it is taken into consideration in your debt ratios. So if we look at this equation here, if for your debt, it's included in the numerator there. So you'll be able to buy something as long as you take that current home into consideration and do not exceed the allowable debt ratio. All right, so where some of this is leading, and this isn't the only slide you'll see about this, I can go on and on about this, it's beware the FAUX-SICIAN loan. Again, we're talking about a physician loan. Beware the FAUX-SICIan loan. I hope you appreciate that creativity. I came up with that name myself. But I get these kinds of emails all the time. Here's an example of somebody who thought they were working with a company who said they were offering a physician loan. It was not a true physician loan. And how do we know that? First highlighted section here. The student, this was a graduating student, or he will exclude my student, he is talking about the loan officer, will exclude my student loans only if I can show deferment for 12 months, which is my only current issue. Well, that's a deal-breaking only current issue, because not only this summer will you not have proof of your student loan payments, you will not have proof that they are deferred for a 12-month period. And as this person went on to write, they even tried contacting Navient to get their proof of what their payments will be, but they had no success with that. So that's something you'll really have to watch out for. And again, that's not the only slide you're going to see about that. Alex asks a good question. How much higher is the mortgage rate for physician loans versus traditional mortgage loan rates? Meaning, example, is it 0.5% higher, 1% higher? So it's in the similar range as a conforming loan. So what you'll find is the rates will be similar to maybe about 0.25% higher. The reason for that is, although it allows no money down, it allows no PMI, you guys don't default. If you qualify, you don't default. So it's not like it has to be bumped up. Now, even in the scenarios where the interest rate is a little bit higher, it's still a less expensive loan because there's no mortgage insurance. So as soon as we start talking about a conforming loan, the only way to get out of mortgage insurance on a conforming loan is to put 20% down. Most graduating med students, most residents do not have 20% to put down. And if they do, They'd rather use it to pay off other debt or for a cushion or something like that. So the physician loan usually is going to be less expensive, even if you happen to be buying in a market where the rate is a little bit higher. Again, it goes back to not having PMI, not having mortgage insurance. So good question. So I mentioned the monthly payment was PITI. And how does that break out? P&I is your principal and interest. That's the amount that you owe on what you borrowed. The taxes is the real estate taxes. Every month that you make a mortgage payment, you'll be paying 1/12 of your property taxes. And then insurance is your homeowner's insurance, in case of fire, damage, things like that, not to be confused with mortgage insurance, the PMI. And then for those of you buying a condo or townhome, you also have your homeowners association dues or condo dues. So if we look at that example of a home being purchased for $275,000, in my example here, I'm assuming 3.75% as the interest rate. Doesn't mean that's going to be your interest rate. Doesn't mean that's what it is right now. I use this as a placeholder. That question comes up all the time. So again, your loan officer will talk to you about your interest rate, but it's a ballpark. So your P&I will be about $1,300. Taxes obviously will vary depending on where you're buying in the country. Insurance is your homeowner's insurance, a ballpark of about $50. So this is how we get to about $1,500 a month for a $275,000 purchase. And your loan officer can go through as many scenarios as you need. Again, you're buying in a more reasonable market or less expensive market where homes are in the $150,000 range. Great, you can buy a home for under $1,000 a month. You're buying. So our company is based out of Columbus, Ohio. I happen to be based out of Atlanta, Georgia. Emory is like right that way, right up the street behind my house. So I'm a short jog away. You want to buy something near Emory, you're going to be more expensive. The homes will be in the 4s. If you want to stick to the 2s and 3s, it's probably going to be a condo. So again, this is all just part of that, showing you how that analysis is going to work. So let's spend a few minutes about the different loan types. As I mentioned, most of you are going to need a physician loan if you're going to buy at this stage. And for those of you who don't need it, many of you will benefit from it because there's no PMI. So a physician loan is a real thing. It's a special mortgage just for doctors. It's what's called a portfolio loan, meaning it sits on the portfolio of the institution that provides the financing for it. Not every company has it. We pioneered this, and for many years we were really the only ones out there. After a while, there were a handful. Yeah, you've got a little bit more than a handful now, but your challenge as a consumer is that it's not really regulated on how they're marketed. So there are companies out there who will call something a physician loan, but it's not a true physician loan. So they might be offering what's called a conforming loan. And a conforming loan means you conform to the guidelines established by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. In short, they're like the 800-pound gorilla in the mortgage world, much like Sally Mae is in the student loan world. And the challenge is most graduating med students don't conform to those guidelines. I'll be showing you a slide on that in just a minute. Let's say you don't have good credit. Let's say a physician loan was not an option for you. You weren't a graduating med student. You weren't a doctor. You didn't have good credit. You weren't the ideal candidate for a borrower. You'd be looking at what's called an FHA loan. That's a loan where the government got involved to help increase home ownership. It's a riskier pool of borrowers because they are more likely to default. Therefore, it is a more expensive loan. the rates are good. By the way, across the board, any loan you look at right now, rates are excellent. Where the FHA is more expensive is in the fees and mortgage insurance, because it's a higher rate of default, so a higher insurance rate. And then there's the VA loan, or Veterans Administration Loan, and as that name implies, it's only for eligible military. And based on the questions, it sounds like we've got at least a couple military households in the crowd today. So a VA loan is a loan that also allows for no money down. However, the kicker here is that the mortgage insurance is very expensive. VA has what's called a funding fee. They don't call it PMI, but it's called the funding fee, which is very expensive. So if you have access to a physician loan, if you qualify for a physician loan, if you have the credit scores required for a physician loan, then that's going to be the cheaper option. If you don't have good credit and you still want zero down, then VA will offer that. Again, it's just at a cost. So why is it that most of you will need a physician loan? So we know you have little to no savings. We know you've got student loan debt. That's a given. Here are the challenges. The middle bullet point on the left, and I've touched on this one already, no proof from your lender of what your payments are going to be for the next 12 months. Okay, we talked about that one. Bullet point to the right of that one, no employment contract. So once you guys match, what is it that you get in hand? You get a letter, you get a match letter, it's called an offer letter, and it's not a contract. It's not a signed employment contract. It's a letter stating, congratulations, you've been accepted to our program. Here's a salary, here's a start date. Traditional lending for a conforming loan, FHA loan, they require for an approval a signed employment contract. Most residency programs don't actually issue a signed employment contract until the end of the summer, after the point when you would have needed it if you're going to be buying a home. So a true physician loan approves you based on your match letter. And then there are things like it allows you to start before the job. You don't have to show proof of a medical license as a doctor when you're buying a home. So all these points are extremely important. And like I said, I get emails all the time from students who run into issues. So here's someone who emailed me in April of last year. Again, this was a graduating student. Normally, I cross out all of the, kind of any identifying information. Here, Johnson Financial is generic enough and small enough that it doesn't matter. But they were going through Johnson Financial. They were told, then they said they verified that it's a physician loan, but they said, our problem is with our student loan repayments. They are insisting that we show them documents from our loan servicers with the amount our repayments will be each month. All right, well, right there, this company, this small company, they do not have a true physician loan. And so that's the problem that they're running into. Here's another example, somebody who matched in Salt Lake, after hearing me in Rochester, and they were being asked for two things: a contract that is signed by their university for the residency program, and a statement from the financial aid office stating what the monthly payments would be on their student loans. Again, a financial aid office, typically they're not willing to put something on paper on what your payments will be because they don't know. They can list out what you might be eligible for, but it's not proof from your student loan servicer. So these are the physician loans that I'm talking about. And I created a cheat sheet here that, again, it will be in your handouts. You're welcome to screen capture this. These should be the first 7 points or questions that you ask a loan officer on the left-hand side to get the discussion going to make sure that the loan that you're being presented is going to work for you. Then also in the handouts, I'm not going to spend time right now going through each one of these slides, but here's a series of 4 slides with each of these 4 loan types, with a thumbs up, thumbs down on when is one of these loans appropriate and when is it not appropriate. And again, it's not that any of these 4 are bad loans, it's just you won't qualify for some of these loans, or some of them might be more expensive in your scenario. So again, that's going to be in the handouts as well. So in the intro, for those of you that were on at the start, you saw this slide already where I talked about who we are, and we're based out of Ohio. It's a family business, but because of our specialization and the only company to specialize with doctors, only doctors, we have a national reach. However, we do not operate in all 50 states. So a program that we set up to help the schools where we present for members of AMA, AOA, SOMA, so if someone hears us speak, if you reach out to us and you request a loan officer, and you're buying in a city in which we operate, then certainly you work with one of our loan officers, no problem. If you're buying in a city where we do not operate, at the very least, what we do is we put you in touch with a loan officer who we've vetted. We have somebody on staff who tracks what's happening in the marketplace across the country, who has a physician loan who doesn't, and they will make a recommendation for you. So at least you're not going on some wild goose chase and not in jeopardy of going down the physician loan path. So I mention that so you guys know at least we can be a resource for you. But here's kind of my punchline to this. Because we recommend other companies to help you guys out, if you're buying somewhere where we don't do business, we get contacted all the time from companies who want to be kind of on the list, so that we recommend them. So here's an email that I received from Michelle. Michelle wrote me, "Good morning, Tal. I've attached the guidelines for our doctor loan programs." See more? He goes on to write, "This is a Freddie Mac loan and does require MI, does require mortgage insurance." So you guys already know enough to know this is not a true physician loan. You know better. What about your colleagues who haven't heard this talk, other graduating med students? All they're going to run across out there is a company who's marketing what they're calling a doctor loan or a physician loan, but under the hood, it's a Freddie Mac loan, it's a conforming loan, and requires mortgage insurance. So this is kind of the crusade I'm on making sure you guys don't fall, into the wrong path here. And we certainly had to handhold my younger brother many, many years ago when he was going through the process, and same thing applies now. So let's get into some numbers here, some more numbers. How much does it cost to make all this happen? So at closing, there are 3 things to budget for. There's the down payment, the closing costs, and escrows. Down payment, you're in control of that, can be 0. If you have money to put down, wonderful. So you're in charge of that one. Then there's the closing costs. Those are the fees associated with buying a home. It will range anywhere from 1 to 3%, depending on where you are in the country. Your loan officer and your real estate agent will give you some guidance on that. One of the best tips I can give you is if you are short on cash, tell your real estate agent to structure the purchase so that the seller is covering some, if not all, of your closing costs. Then you've got escrows, which is not a cost and it's not a fee, but it is money you need to plan for, you need a budget for it to bring it to closing. It's several months worth of taxes and insurance. So most of you will have to bring anywhere from 0 to about $5,000 to closing. I don't have a slide on this, and the school might already be providing some information on this at some point, but there's one more personal loan available to you guys as a graduating med student. It gives you up to $30,000. If you go to graduationloan.com, loan or loans, I can't remember, graduationloanorloans.com. It's up to $30,000. And so if you think you're going to need some funds to help just over the summer with a transition, keep that in mind. Seth asks, how would you factor for a non-medical spouse's income if they haven't yet acquired a job in the city to which you are moving? All right. So Seth, good question. First of all, I'm going to teach you some terminology that I don't suggest you use with your spouse, but you should know it. What your spouse who's moving with you, the technical lingo, I didn't make this up, that's just the industry, it's called a trailing spouse. It's not going to earn you any points using that terminology in the home, but that's the trailing spouse. And if the trailing spouse does not have a job lined up, then you can't use their income. If they are moving, then they have to have a letter from their current employer stating, we know you're moving and we are going to keep you on and you are allowed to work remotely, or they have to have an actual signed employment contract for the job in that city where you are headed. Connor asks, how do you get the seller to pay closing costs in a seller's market? Great point, you can't. And that's why I said right now, of the two tips, there are some homes that in certain markets, or there's a glut of condos or things like that, where you can still negotiate to have the seller pay the closing costs. But that's just an outright negotiation. And much easier to do in a buyer's market. In a seller's market, what I had mentioned is that the second tip here, where you're modifying the contract, you're building in the closing costs into the price of the home. So again, pros and cons, it means you're adding several $1,000s to the price of the home. So you are financing that amount. It does add several dollars a month to your monthly mortgage payment. It doesn't add too much because you're amortizing it over 30 years, so it's certainly not free. You're borrowing that money instead of paying the cash. But that's how you would do it in a seller's market because the seller isn't giving up anything for it. And as a follow-up to that, looks like, Mark, you're asking, do you recommend a 20 or 30-year mortgage? So what I recommend is the absolute shortest mortgage that you can afford and qualify for. However, the typical graduating med student needs a loan that is amortized over 30 years. Again, unless you are buying in one of those markets where you can buy a home for $125,000, $150,000, or you've got a second household income and you're buying still a reasonable home in the $200,000, $300,000 range, and you can make the higher payments that come with a 20-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage. The other thing is, if you're selling, if you're going to hold on to this house for the next 3 to 6 years or so, don't worry about a 20-year loan. It's okay to do a 30-year mortgage, gives you some flexibility on your financing while in residency, and nothing's preventing you from making extra payments if you have that cash available. So you can accelerate the payments, but if you're selling it after several years anyway, really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter because you're going to be paying off that entire mortgage anyway. So final set of slides here has to do with the timeline, and looks like we're going to run just a few minutes late. So I apologize for that, but like I said, after this, I'll still stick around and answer any additional questions. So another great question. Stephanie asks, do you offer balloon mortgages? You do not want a balloon mortgage. So what a balloon mortgage is let's say there's something called a 5-year balloon. It means the payments are still amortized over a 30-year period, but at the end of 5 years, that loan comes due. So no matter what, you have to pay off that mortgage either through selling the home, or what if you're not having success in selling it, or you can't do it on that timeline for whatever reason, or you're forced to refinance that mortgage. So you guys want to stay clear of a balloon mortgage. I don't think you're going to come across it that often. The two you're going to be looking at, usually you're going to be looking at an ARM, which is what is an adjustable rate mortgage. And what that means is the rate is fixed. You've got a 5-year ARM, a 7-year ARM, a 10-year ARM. The rate is fixed for that period of time, for that 5, 7, or 10-year period. Now, at the end of that period, the loan is still amortized over 30 years. But at the end of that 5, 7, or 10-year period, you don't have to sell the home. You don't have to refinance. If you do nothing, the loan will adjust. The interest rate will adjust based on whatever the market conditions are at that time. And you're going to be tracking it. If you know you're going to be selling, then it doesn't matter where the rates are. You're going to be selling that home, paying off that mortgage. If you plan to stay in that house for an extended period of time, then if you notice at any point you're in a rising interest rate market, you'll just refinance into a fixed rate at that point, and then not have to worry about it. The reason most residents look at ARMs rather than fixed is because, all else being equal, the interest rate on an ARM is lower than a fixed. Nothing's wrong with either one. It's just the strategy of, in residency, your strategy is to get by. You're not trying to get rich on your real estate. You're not trying to accelerate your mortgage payment down as much as possible. You're trying to survive financially, from a work standpoint. You'll have a crazy schedule. So the goal is to have the mortgage that gets you into the right house, make it affordable. You certainly don't want to overstretch, and you want to keep the payments as low as possible during that period. So good question. All right, so getting back to the timeline, what to do and when. Step number 1 is that you're going to select a loan officer. Most of you will do that at any point between now and as soon after match as possible. Now is not too early. Even if you don't know exactly where you're headed, and it could be, you're headed to one of 2 or 3 different cities or even states, that's okay. You can reach out to a loan officer starting now. It doesn't cost anything. I mentioned one way to do this. You can go to our website at PhysicianLoans.com, put in a request there for a loan officer. Here's an example for Anna, who wrote, I'm a 4th-year med student. We'll find out where I matched for residency in mid-March. And then she opened up with a few questions she had. Notice she was asking one of her questions here about ARMs. So you can just put in your contact information. You can ask questions, but a good loan officer is going to know what questions to ask you to lead you through that process. In the handouts, I also include a few questions to ask the loan officer about themselves, questions to ask about their process. Notice what I have highlighted here. We offer a true physician loan, because most of you will need that. And another question I highlighted, what student loan documentation will you need from my student loan company? The answer should be nothing at this stage. Why do I highlight those? Here's an example from a bank. They're a legitimate bank, reputable bank, and here's a flyer that they have. And notice the middle program is called a doctor loan, and here I did black out any of their identifying information, but if I mention this bank's name, a lot of you would recognize the name. So if we blow up that middle section for their doctor loan, notice it's a reputable bank. They claim it's a doctor loan. Look at the first bullet point. First of well, they only do 95% financing. I'm fine with that. There are a couple of true physician loan products out there that are not 100% financing, so I'm willing to let that one slide. They still have lender-paid mortgage insurance, so that is a form of mortgage insurance. And notice the third bullet point. Student loan debt deferred for greater than 12 months from the date of closing can be excluded from the DTI. Well, you've seen that language before. Why do you see that exact same language? That is standard Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA language. So here's a standard Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loan, and they're calling it a doctor loan. And that's why it has mortgage insurance. The only way you get out of mortgage insurance is you put 20% down in this scenario. So, and that's from a reputable bank. So that's, again, you need to watch out. But why are you reaching out to a loan officer as your first step? So that you get pre-qualified. And again, there's no cost to this. You can get pre-qualified at any point between now and as soon after match as possible. You can wait until match. That's perfectly okay. But once you're pre-qualified, now you reach out to a real estate agent. So these two professionals are going to be the two people that you're going to rely on to get through this process. You do need to trust them. They will help you out. Question comes up often, well, Tal, how can I trust them? They're making money on me. They want me to buy a home. They're making money on me. That's true. They are professionals. This is their career. This is how they make money. This is how they earn a living. But just as in any profession, there are those that I would trust, those that I wouldn't. When I look for a car mechanic, when I look for a plumber, when I look for an attorney, there are those I trust, those I don't. And I'm going to work with someone who's really offering a good service and good advice. By the way, when I go to my doctor makes money on me. I'm okay with that. But there's some I'd go to, some that I wouldn't. Some that try to rack up the procedures and diagnostics and things like that. So no different here. The professionals are the professionals, and they're going to help you out properly. So we get asked a lot also how to find a good real estate agent. One way is to go to drsagent.com and just request a real estate agent in one or multiple cities where you think you're going to be. The sooner you start the research, in my opinion, the better. Doesn't cost you anything. This is a network of agents from across the country who do specialize in working with the medical community, especially relocating a residence. So it's a network that, it's part of the member benefit through AMA, AOA, AMSA, SOMA. So it's something that's reputable that, again, it's just a quick shortcut to getting in touch with a good real estate agent. Here's an example. We're short on time. I'm not going to go into too much information here, but here's an example of a flyer that I got in my mailbox from a local agent. Now, in this case, he happens to be a DRS agent. He also happens to be somebody that I know who lives one neighborhood down from me. And I asked him if it was okay to use this flyer because what I liked is if you look at his language, he's not a hardcore salesperson. That's the kind of person you need. By the way, if any of you plan to come to Atlanta, he's a good guy to reach out to. But notice, he realizes that a good agent is going to be a problem solver, a listener, a grinder, a therapist, someone who can get the deal done, not someone who's just looking for another transaction, not someone who's just looking to make a sale. And notice on the back of his flyer, these are 3 different neighborhoods. They're all kind of in the vicinity of Emory. And Old Fourth Ward also is going to be not too far from Morehouse. But you've got, each statistics on each neighborhood on what home values have done, how properties are selling. And so a good real estate agent is going to walk you through this kind of data. And the sooner you get started with that and start tracking the market, then once you match, and once you schedule to go look at homes, you'll be a much more informed consumer. just like I had questions you ask a loan officer, the handouts have a sheet on what questions to ask the real estate agent. So most of you, you'll get your loan officer and your real estate agent will be matched, and again, anytime between now and as soon after match as possible. Now you're ready to actually make an offer on a home. Most of you will make an offer on a home around late March, April, or May, with the goal of moving in or closing on the place and moving in June, late May, June, maybe even early July or so. Plan on anywhere from 30 to 45 days from the top of the screen, from when you make an offer on a home to when you close on a home. The industry is very busy right now. Because rates are low, because there's a lot of refinance going on, things are just taking a while. So normally it's slam dunk to close within 30 days. That might be possible right now, but as we get into the busier summer months, just budget a little bit more time and have that discussion on timeline with your real estate agent. I don't go through each of these steps here. I put them up here as a reference. These are the steps that your loan officer and your real estate agent will walk you through to get to the point of where you can close on the home and move in. So I'm kind of a crusade on trust. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but here's an example of a flyer that came to my mailbox just last week. I couldn't believe it. This is from a bank all of you have heard of. Well, they're one of the mega banks. You've seen their commercials. They advertise credit cards a lot, but this killed me. Here's their tagline: adjust how you pay, not how you live. John, if you're still on, you're probably really getting a kick out of this, especially someone who's supposed to be, budget-minded, budget-conscious, and preaching that to your students. This is wrong advice, false advice, and that's why when you want to get pre-qualified for the home and make sure that the loan officer is walking you through that process properly, because it is how you live. You don't need the very expensive home right now. You need the right home to have a roof over your head while you're in residency. You don't want to get carried away right now, but this is the approach that a lot of the mega banks, which are just high sales, is what they do. So again, we're short on time. I'm not going to go through all of these examples here, but I had a few more examples of the FAUX-SICIAN loans scenario. So here, let me just show you. Here's one where they were referred to their real estate agent, who wasn't very familiar with a true physician loan, referred them to a loan officer who, this was their lineup of what they call a physician loan. And notice, 10% down, monthly mortgage insurance. Upfront, these are all just various different kinds of mortgage insurance. So it doesn't work, guys. And, final slide here. Here again, just someone else who was recommended to someone who ended up reaching out to us for more information or better information. Again, they're calling it a physician loan. Look at the fourth bullet point, lender paid mortgage insurance, and look at the fifth bullet point. You've seen this language before. Any student loans deferred for greater than 12 months from closing can be excluded, yada, yada, yada. So just be careful. Like I said, one shortcut, it's not the only way, but one shortcut is if you do go to our website, you request a loan officer, whether you're buying in a market where we operate or not, at least you'll have someone there who offers a true physician loan. I gave you the DRS agent site. Here's what it boils down to. Do you match in a city where the housing is affordable? Because as a graduating med student with good credit, I don't think I mentioned this yet, scores of 700 and above, you will qualify for a physician loan. Now it's just a matter of determining how much. Make sure you have the right loan officer, the right real estate agent, and the right loan. And you'll have as good of a process as you can have. So hopefully Yeah, the earth mortgage you, maybe this is what you felt like. Again, that deer in the headlights. You feel a little bit wiser now, a little bit more in control, a little bit like you can breathe easy, knowing how to navigate this process. These are the resources that some of what I referenced in this talk. It's going to be there in the handouts as well. And then if I don't act as a loan officer, but whether you're working with one of the loan officers in our company or if we recommend somebody, if you ever want to bounce anything off me now or in the future, you're always welcome to email me, and either I respond to you personally or I will get it into the right hands for someone who can give you a true, proper, correct answer. So with that, that's the end of my slides, end of the forward part of the presentation. What I will do is stick around and answer any additional questions that you have. I'll go ahead and stop the recording. For those of you that need to leave, have a great evening. Thank you very much. John, again, I appreciate the invite to share this information. I hope everybody found it to be very beneficial.